Let's get started. Welcome to the Hellscape that is scraping legislative data as an open source project. For starters, just out of curiosity, how many people here have been on any government website? All right, awesome. Keep those hands up if you enjoyed the experience and found the data that you wanted. Good for you. That's impressive. Oh gosh. Yeah, I was gonna say, it's definitely can be a struggle. So, while legislative data is nominally public, it does tend to be buried in opaque state government websites. OpenState's attempts to load it all, normalize it, and make it easily searchable and enable legislative tracking across every state. That is one heck of a project to take on. My name is Rylie Johnson. I am officially a software engineer with plural policy, but I do identify as more of a code gremlin. I do tend to break things further before actually figuring out a fix for them. We're on the data engineering team at Plural, which is formerly Civic Eagle. And also, this is my first time speaking at a public conference, so please bear with my anxiety. Thank you so much. Awesome. Just a disclaimer, I do adore my job. I love trying to figure out ways to get all of this data. I'm not complaining, just highlighting the strangeness that we've encountered and just some of those weird things for state sites. Originally, OpenStates was founded at PyCon in 2009. It was the goal to standardize, clean, and publish all of the legislative data that we could get to the public to improve civic engagement and help people understand the legislative process that creates public policy. Occasionally also would contract with some of the state legislatures in order to standardize data and improve access, but very few states were actually interested in improving that access, and very few projects actually made it to completion. Originally, it was part of Sunlight Labs until 2016, when it fell mainly on the shoulders of one of the founders, James Turk, who maintained it by solo, mostly from 2016 to 2021, when he brought the project under the Plural umbrella. I got trained in as number 2, and now we actually do have an entire engineering team, which is very nice, because there's a lot of weird stuff. So, OpenStates has scrapers for all different data types, bills, legislators, committees, events, votes across 50 states, federal, DC, Puerto Rico, and Virgin Islands. Typically, we run about over 100 a day, some at least once a day, others every couple of hours. But as you can imagine, we run into some weird kind of things. Typically, I think you don't even need to be on these websites to know that state legislation, federal legislation is pretty slow to evolve, even with all of the different marvelous technology options that we have nowadays. Standardizing that data across state borders is absolutely insane. Fortunately, I got into the project late, so I didn't have to do a whole lot of that, but there's still a lot that we still have yet to figure out, especially when we work on new data types. Even with, here we go. Processes can vary even with how, bill versions get published. For those of you who aren't familiar, bills try to edit standing law, and bill versions can differ because state legislators have different text that they want to add to it, things like that. They do tend to mark those up and change that edit. There is one state in particular that didn't have that digitized. They actually have all of the bill versions printed out at a specific printer, put on a truck, driven to the state capitol 2 hours away, marked up by hand by the legislators, and then driven back to the printer so that they can actually print out the new version. Very archaic, still to this day, probably still running. But fortunately, they have actually started adding bill text onto their website, so normal people can access it. Another kind of weird bit, there is one state in particular where we don't have access to the vote data. haven't thought that it was worth it to post like how legislators vote on specific bits of legislation. But there is one company in that state that does have that information, and they just charge whatever they want for it. So we're pretty sure that they just pay somebody to sit in there and actually record them by hand, but we, haven't gotten to that point, so we'll just acknowledge that we don't have it for now. But it is kind of a weird bit. But working on this kind of stuff, one fact that I've definitely come to terms with is that legislative websites suck. Even when they don't suck, they're bad. It's fairly common to be really hard to find information as a user, let alone find scrapable pages. Some websites are just interesting where like you start with like a new fancy landing page, and then the deeper you get into the website, it just becomes older and older versions of the internet where you're like, how is this still running? But it is running, so they don't actually change it. So you can actually see some state websites where they definitely have web pages that were designed in Web 1. But it is interesting to get into it because there's all different kinds of little, like when you're scraping it, you get all kinds of interesting console messages from different legislative developers. And we do tend to like try and do our best to find the most accurate and up-to-date sources for a lot of our data. But even then, sometimes we'll find out after we've built the scraper that it just isn't updated as regularly or whatnot. So we'll have users complain to us about bills being late and things like that, but we just had no idea because we scraped from the wrong spot. Also, sometimes legislative websites aren't the most secure. I don't know if anyone's that surprised by it. But there was a case where one state had a SQL injection of not safe for work content on their legislator table. And we raised it as an issue with them to be like, you guys might want to take that down and upgrade your security, which they did, but then they also accused us of doing the injection. So we've learned from that experience. Sometimes even just getting access is a trial and error challenge. With data impacting the public, you'd think it'd be easy to get, all that jazz. Not the case. Some state websites have implemented Cloudflare, so like normal scrapers can't actually get any of the data, so we've had to find ways around that. And like sometimes even with like how states have started adding this kind of data to their sites, there isn't like a super clear path to get to it, even if it is on a web page. In one case in particular, there was one state where their website wasn't super clear, wasn't a great way to go about scraping it. And apparently, the right person complained to the right other person at a conference, and we actually ended up with a napkin with an address and a username and password for a read-only account on their server. So that is framed in someone's office right now. But we've definitely had to come up with interesting ways to get to this stuff. Sometimes we can reach out directly to the legislative office tech team and get access or whitelisted or whatever in order to get this data, but not all of them like us or are particularly responsive, so we've had to find some interesting ways. There is another state in particular that just has a website that is has some garbage web pages, but we've figured out a way to forge calls to their not so public APIs, so it's fine, we get it somehow. Another thing that I've come to learn about this kind of getting into this stuff is that just anomalies occur. There's just some things where I just have absolutely no idea what's happening or why they decided to go about this. But we have a custom-built task runner that creates warnings every time that like a scraper fails 5 times in a row, because most of the time it's self-healing. There's just weird anomalies that'll happen, but most of the time somebody internally fixes it, so it'll run the next time around. But there was particularly one case where the Office of Legislative Services kind of fell off the face of the earth. The website of the office itself was still live, but the application that we were using to scrape data and that they used to publish any information about the bills that they had completely disappeared, fell off the face of the earth. I didn't know what to do, so I emailed and kept getting delivery incomplete errors, like one after another. Tried for like I think Gmail tried for like 2 weeks straight to try and deliver this email, and it didn't work. So I had to get over my millennial fear of phones and call. No one answered, so to my joy, but also confusion. And I had to search the internet to see like if this was still a funded place, if this was gonna close. There was absolutely nothing. But lo and behold, the app came back several weeks later, like everything was totally fine. And it's just something I had to accept. Sometimes another factor that I've had to explain or to get to is that new tech is not always better. There's definitely been a lot of new websites that have come out in the time that I've been working on open states. And clean websites are really nice to scrape. And APIs are also the dream, really, to get all of the data that we need. But sometimes dreams are really fragile, and they can't actually make it through a successful scrape, even if there are only like 5 things on that API. So I've raised a couple issues with those state legislatures on their stability of the API. Sometimes they get back to me, sometimes they don't. Sometimes it improves, sometimes it doesn't. And occasionally, sometimes they add an API, and it might be a little bit like too good. For instance, one added an API while we were creating new legislator scrapers. And we got a lot of the information that we are requiring for that. Like, easily got access to their name, their district that they represent, email, office information, addresses, voicemail, stuff like that. Also got some benefits like occupation, but then also got into things like home address, spouse information, license plate, and occasionally a social security number. I wish I was joking, but that was definitely something that was showing up on their API. I don't know why it would be on that part of it. It should be behind HR, but that's on them. We did raise that as an issue. Fortunately, this time we weren't accused of doing anything with the information. So, but it was just an interesting case for potential legislator identity theft. So these are some of the issues that we've run into with getting all this stuff, and we do make it work most of the time. We do have some bugs and broken things, like currently we're a little bit behind on bill data from Iowa. We're getting throttled by them, and I don't know what's up. But we do get a very comprehensive list or data set for the public. That being said, we do have a lot of different touch points for people to get access to this data. So we have openstates.org, which is a public-facing website where anybody can track and find information about their legislators, bill information, things like that. We do have 2 APIs. One of them is about to be depreciated, so I'm very excited about that one. And we do also have all of this code on GitHub. So it is open source. Anybody can contribute. Anybody can work on our code. But since it is open source, we also know that since it is forkable, some of our competitors do use our code. And at least one contributes back regularly, so that's okay with us. We do also have access to this data for bulk CSV or JSON downloads, and then also nearly complete Postgres data dumps. So however you want to get the data, there are a bunch of different ways to do that. And also being an open source project, we have a lot of different ways to communicate. So we've got the contact email for those who want to go that route. We do have a Slack and a Matrix instance for people who want to use more of that messenger kind of a thing. We do have Twitter for people who are still on Twitter. and want to tweet at us. And for those who are technically literate, we do have a GitHub issues repo where we have a Q&A discussion section, and then also templates that allow you to post issues that you're seeing on the website. As expected, though, templates do tend to get ignored a little bit. And we've also got some pretty thorough documentation. We have an Airtable for new session information that is updated as regularly as I can, especially when people care about new legislators in the state and things like that, making sure that people know when things are going to be scraped, when things are going to be accurate, stuff like that. We try to keep quarterly blog posts going so that people know exactly what's going on with the project and where we're going and who's working on it. And then also, we have our own little summit that we've been trying to do more often. But since we have all of these different ways to communicate, we get all kinds of different different types of communication issues. So one of my favorites, and one of the most common, is something like this. This is a ticket. There it just says district, ? And there's no content. This is very common. I get a lot of emails that are just either one word or wrong legislator, and it's like, I can't do anything to help you, but thank you for reaching out. And sometimes they do get a little bit more specific. Here's an issue about specific circumstances, which gives us a little bit more detail, but I don't know if they're talking about an action or bill text, or there's nothing about even what jurisdiction I should start looking in. So, incredibly helpful. Occasionally we do get, this is a whole bunch of text that is actually meant for members of or of the legislation, and about gun rights and stuff like that. Just because we aggregate the data doesn't mean that we actually have impact on it. But it is what it is. And then we also tend to get a lot of questions, like this one, where it's about how bills actually impact daily life in one way or another. These actually kind of break my heart to get, because I do want to be able to answer them, but I have no idea. We do just have to kind of remind them we just collect the information, and we don't have the expertise to actually answer any of these, and they should be reaching out to other people at state level or wherever to get that kind of information. But it is an interesting little bit. Lastly, the last thing that I want to share that I've definitely learned about doing all of this is that it is absolutely worth all of the chaos and little road bumps. Truly, doing this makes a difference for a lot of people, and definitely provides the opportunity to see more clearly what's happening with the legislation. So I couldn't imagine doing anything else. If any of these things are interesting to you, or seem like problems that you'd like to help solve, please help us. We could definitely use more contributors, and we do have a running backlog of issues that are in different varieties to take on. We do use fancy new Python stuff and try to keep everything updated as much as possible, but could always use more help. And I went through this way faster than I thought I would, but I hope you enjoyed. And this is my contact information, and now we're ready for questions.
So, a couple questions. I assume you're using Python, and you're pretty much, developing whatever framework you're developing yourselves.
Yep.
And it's not based off a beautiful soup or something like that.
Yes. It's I think based on scrapelib.
Okay, that one.
But we've got a couple of different types of, or all of our scrapers are written in Python. They are using different frameworks, though.
So, again, maybe a naive question. Did you ever look at the combination of Nutch and Solar and then post-processing that data? Because, you can quickly evolve what you're looking for, what you get back, and how you can structure it. It may not work for legislative bills, I'm not really sure, but it's pretty general purpose. As long as you're looking for specific things, you can tune it, when, trial and error very quickly and get, you're familiar with not just all. And you can also, if for some reason you see, an easy opening to enhance it, obviously it's open source, it's an Apache project or set of Apache projects. Obviously people know Solar with Elasticsearch and Lucene are the two bases for that commercial product. So, yeah, I'd be interested, maybe afterwards talk and find out how you're doing things and maybe throw some things in there.
Yeah, I definitely was not around for those kind of talks, but would be interested to hear about that. And also, I will be doing one of the upscale talks later about the scraping library that we are currently trying to use. So, little promo for that talk.
Hey, this was really interesting, and I'm looking forward to when you replicate this at the county level. Ha ha ha.
Perfect.
How many counties are there in the United States? Could you give us just a little more information about what kinds of stuff you're scraping? I mean, is it just bill text? Is it bill reports? Is it testimony? Is it budget data? Is it all of the above? That's my first question. And then my second question, do you guys have any kind of relationship with the National Conference of State Legislatures?
I'm going to answer the second one first. I think we do. Also, just because I don't want to forget what it was. And then, first question, yes. For the most part, we most of our information is mostly bills and resolutions. We do have some kind of like stuff around fiscal notes and stuff like that at the legislation level. It's most of the time we just try to get like the basics of it. So like or the title, different actions on it, vote data. Versions we don't actually process for bill text. That has definitely been something that we're interested in including on open states, since it is kind of a huge thing that actually, or like people need access to. We only provide the links to it. But then yeah, so we've got most of that kind of stuff for bill data. We have information on the legislators. We also do have a Find Your Legislator application, so you can put in your address and find who represents you at state and federal level. It might not be entirely accurate right now because redistricting is kind of screwed with us. But yeah, we've got stuff like that. Committee data, events, hearing events, and things like that, and how they relate back to bills. But good question. Yeah.
Let's do this so we can
That was a say, yeah.
How many people are on the project and how is it funded? For
Yes.
how much?
So currently, I think we have like 6 people on the engineering team that like can touch this at any one point. I do most of the daily operations now. We are backed by a VC company, so we do have a bit of money in the back, so we don't have to worry about it too much anymore. That was part of why it got brought to Plural in the first place, was it's not sustainable to do just for one person without funding. There we go. I'll repeat that. Jesse, the CTO of Plural, is giving a talk on that tomorrow morning. So if you are interested in more about that kind of stuff, stay tuned.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Have you partnered with any, if you're getting all these questions on your site about people who are wondering, have legal questions or whatever, have you partnered with like the EFF or anything like that, so you can just be like, here, we'll just pass you right along to this public, Southern Poverty Law Center or whatever. Just be like, here, we'll just pass you along to these guys and they know what to do.
No, but we definitely should. That would be really helpful. plural is for profit. Yeah.
Do you have any plans to add functionality to send like email notifications on my specific legislators at the state level whenever they vote on things like GovTrack does at the federal level?
Yeah, not on vote data. We do have tracking on bills, so you can like know where bills are at and if there's action on those, but not on specific votes or legislators themselves. That would be a good one.
Any other questions? Oh, yeah, I thought you
Go
were
for
saying
it.
no, you didn't.
We got time.
You might get the sense I work in government, which is why I'm like totally fascinated. And I am so sorry I didn't even know this existed. So I'm glad I'm here. I can think of a million reasons to answer each of the issues that you raised, like why those things happen, from underfunding of technology at the government level to legacy systems to all of the stuff. But I am curious if y'all ever try to do anything like rank states in terms of who's more transparent and who's less, and in terms of making data available. And God, I just have to ask, do you see a difference between blue states and red states?
Okay. I will not be answering question 2 first this time. Let's see. So for the first question, yes, we actually did historically have a map of the states that gave exactly like a ranking grade to each of the states on like how much data we had and how what the coverage was. That has kind of fallen by the wayside. I'm actually not entirely sure where that code is anymore, but that is actually one thing that I've been pushing for with this year of actually having time and interest where people want to know exactly how much data we have in each of the different areas. So that will be coming hopefully this year. As to the second question, I will say yes, I do notice a difference. I'm not gonna get into specifics.
Yeah. Let me think of how to phrase this question. As far as are there any resources for legislative bodies for how to, like, if they want to make their data more accessible and transparent, does Plural offer any like white papers or documentation if states want to go that route? And do you guys think that there's even if it's worth sort of articulating a standard for how to structure legislative data?
Yeah, that is a good question. I don't recall there. Like, I think there is like with the historical stuff about doing that contracting work. I think there is guidelines that we do have around like what would make this kind of stuff more accessible. But it is so specific on state per state. I don't think that there is a ruling body that would be able to make all of the states obey and get all of this stuff out. But it would be an interesting option.
Hi, have you noticed a grouping of are there certain software vendors that you see over and over again providing state legislative data? I'm looking at the city and county data, and Granicus was the 800-pound gorilla, but then they started buying their smaller competitors during the pandemic, and so now they're probably 95% of the market in that case. Do you see that at the state level, or is it just kind of a dog's breath of different vendors?
I mean, we do have quite a few competitors that do have that kind of information at state and federal level. It doesn't really seem to be a whole lot, and they do tend to buy up more of the like smaller organizations that like get more state specific. I know that there's a bunch of state specific trackers that are available where it's just like very state specific, but not.
Okay.
There's not that whole much.
What's your business model?
Tomorrow talk. That I don't know that. I just do the code monkey bits.
Other questions?
We got 2.
Cool, I guess I have good reflexes. Hi, I actually do something similar to this, so I'm going to talk to you after this, but
Excellent.
with different sorts of data. But my question, because this is something that drives me crazy, is how do you keep track of all 100 and something of your scrapers? Like, what do you do to orchestrate that?
As I said, we have a custom-built task runner. It's definitely like something that I don't blame anybody for glossing over and hearing. It doesn't work super well, but it does do the thing. And yeah, so that keeps track of like most of the latest runs in the last like I think it's like 20 times that it's run, and that's kind of a nice way to. It's very clear coded on like green if it actually ran or red if it failed. So
Airflow.
nifty, yeah.
Apache Airflow.
Oh well, I mean, yeah, we're trying. We'll get there.
Again, I might be getting ahead of myself before tomorrow's talk. She won't be coming tomorrow, but so you're sort of you're owned by a private company, but your data is public. You're going to continue to operate publicly. There's no plan to put a wall around it or charge for it, although maybe your funding source probably gets priority access or say in development decisions.
Yes.
Is that sort of correct? Or,
Yeah, actually, and I can get a little bit more into the background of that because I actually started off as engineer for Plural. It is, so we ingested a lot of OpenState's data originally, and I like to call it kind of Google Docs, but for legislation. So we just like use all of the standardized data and then make it nice and friendly so people can collaborate on it. And that's how I kind of got trained in, because like I was working on adapters to get that, like the state code into that project, and then got into OpenStates and contributing back to make sure that like data was accurate through that. And so currently, yes, we are planning on keeping OpenStates public access, and everybody can keep doing that kind of stuff. We do have further functionality and like stuff like bill text behind a sort of paywall. We do have a freemium version, but still in progress on that. But yes, we will keep this free for forever. Yeah. Yeah, of course.
All right. Any other questions? One in the back. One sec.
Getting your steps in.
10,000, right?
Hi. Earlier you mentioned that sometimes web scrapers can just go down. You don't necessarily know why. In the instance of an outage, I guess in like a traditional setting, you have an outage. You let your stakeholders know you have an outage. Who is your stakeholder, and how do you let them know?
Good question. Most of the time we don't. It's definitely like if they notice, they notice. But there's so much going on where we can't really tell like who cares about which specific thing, that it's kind of hard to know with OpenStates like exactly who to warn about these kinds of things. We do try to get ahead of the curve as much as possible. Like I mentioned with that like Find Your Legislator application, I tried to be as upfront as possible with people about like expectations about when that data was going to be updated, how that was going to be completed. Definitely didn't anticipate it to be as much of a problem with redistricting, but we do the best we can on like that kind of stuff. And that application is a majority of traffic to our website. So that's the one where I'm trying to warn people about.
All right. Now, any questions? One more. That's fine. I'm at line 9,800. It's cool. We'll be close.
Perfect.
Are there similar projects or competitors?
Yes. I'd say. Or no. I mean, not that have the open data side of it. Yeah. I was gonna say, also California's not as good as you think.
You just mentioned redistricting a few times. Is there a, I mean, I imagine this adds a whole nother layer of complexity to what you're developing and what you have running here in production, but is there a plan to maybe have pre versus post redistrict data and see how that compares, or just for now just say, hey, we're going to do only current legislation with the current districting and assembly?
Yeah, we do try, since we only have like the bandwidth for like maintaining one source of shapefiles, we do try to be as explicit in like that we are doing current representatives in current districts, which has been a problem. But we definitely have interest in both sets, so would be good to keep.
Hi, thanks for your work. I did have a question. So I'm looking into plural as well as open states, and I see the focus is more on legislative information. And in terms of other facets of government or other departments, let's say like DMV, for example, or other kind of areas of government, right? There's a lot of different sections. Do you guys have plans to move out of policy into different sectors, or are there any other like similar projects that you're aware of that are tackling different areas of government?
There are definitely other projects that cover other aspects of it, like, what is it? Like know who, like more of the, like, we've gotten a lot of questions about like, if we're gonna have stuff around campaign funds and things like that, and there's other projects that already do that kind of stuff. We are probably going to be exploring different stuff outside of legislation, probably not under open states itself, but we are interested in other types of, or branching out beyond just legislative. But good question. Alrighty.
And it's in this room.
No one can ever leave.
Hi. So if your code is getting data, normalizing it, how do you, I guess, if you make a change in your code, how do you know that it results in cleaner data coming back from wherever you're scraping it from? Like, what metrics are you using? How are you getting a sense of that?
Yeah, we do have some insights like into exactly like what kind of data is coming back. It is kind of hard to figure out, like, since there's so much happening and like any scraper can return like thousands of bills. It is kind of hard to like get into the checking of that. Most of the time we kind of have to rely on like people flagging stuff on the open state side of things. In the other application, plural, we do have a dashboard that's around like how many bills have versions and like all that kind of stuff, and we can get a little bit more into the minute details and feed that kind of bugs fix or like things that happen on that side into open states and fix it upstream. So it's kind of cool that way.
All right, well, I think we're done with questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.